Hello, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And really, I did not want to talk much about it until I knew much about it. But then things, it sounds odd when you just make a one-liner statement where you sort of arrive at a conclusion and you really expect that people need to connect the dots themselves when you just give a hint. And normally it should be that case. It should be enough if people really are as savvy as they like to claim to be. But you know what? As I said, in my experience, I've noticed that age doesn't have anything to do with learning from experiences. Age has a lot to do with experiences, yes, because the older you grow, the more experiences you have. But nowadays, that also doesn't matter because nowadays, younger kids are exposed to so much more than we were exposed to at their age. And then our parents were not at all exposed to those things at all until they probably have reached this age. So, each generation gets exposure earlier than the previous ones, and that is why it becomes incumbent upon the previous generation to help navigate. Because actually, as remember, even it's even in Islam, each generation is born for a time beyond. Each generation is born for its own time, and it's born for another time. So we cannot implement our time onto the next generation. And that is also why the concept of culture doesn't actually exist in Islam, not what we refer to as culture. Because, as I said, time is the one thing that has its own laws, it has its own speed, it has its own movement. And, time runs completely differently on different planes, okay, or different dimensions. So in our dimension or our plane, this is how time runs. Okay, it runs in a straight linear line. So when scientists actually talk about how timeline is actually like a box where everything is simultaneously present and it's all, where the present, the past, and the future is present, that is true. But when you're talking about dimensions and planes per se, then we have to regard time as linear when it comes to our particular dimension. The box theory is pertaining to all the dimensions, if that makes any sense, because when you're talking about the box theory of time, I mean, I'm calling it the box theory because it's like, imagine time to be like a box or a cube, where everything is going on simultaneously at the same time without colliding with each other, and you just get to see what you get to see, like a film on camera, the old cameras that we used to have where there's a whole roll of film, or even now, in cinemas, for the longest period of time, the projectors that projected the film onto the cinema screen, it was the same, the roll, the film roll. So you see one frame at a time, but it's all there, right? It's all there. So it's like that. But again, you see it one frame at a time so that you see it in a linear movement, because that's the only way you'll make sense of it. So without divulging much into the time space continuum, let's just try to understand what I'm trying to say here. That if you look at it in our own particular time space continuum, then it is linear and it stops for no one. And so each generation is born for the time ahead. And each previous generation actually does not have that kind of grasp on the time ahead, because we were all born for our own times, right? So, for example, now what the new generation is born into, that timeline and the exposure and everything that they have to navigate through, it's not for us. So I mean, it's not part of our timeline. It's not. But we have the responsibility to see how much of it we can understand, or at least how much of it is overlapping with our own timeline. So whatever is overlapping with our own timeline or time frame is what we can help them navigate through. Now, this is something, again, I've talked about like a million times in all my podcasts. Our basic responsibility is to instill certain norms that are regardless of time space continuum. Okay. They are regardless of your timeline. They're regardless of which generation you're born into. They're regardless of what time you have coming ahead. In fact, these are the things that can probably help preserve some of that timeline, in the sense that it will help preserve the timeline and help maybe lower the chances of implosion or collapse. And this is why these norms are essential, and they're called timeless, and why they're taught from generation to generation and generation to generation. Although, unfortunately, as I've always said, this you know the new modern parents have failed miserably at maintaining that. And that is that there are certain mannerisms, certain social etiquette, certain way of thinking, certain installations on self respect, dignity, which leads on to self protection and privacy. These parents have failed to instill right from the start. Because remember, kids now are not like us. We were already born with a huge sense of privacy. And even then, we also made those mistakes when the internet first came up, of, trying to speak into the void, dropping everything into the void, because to us it was a virtual world that didn't actually exist, so it didn't matter what we dropped into it, right? But then when people like Zuckerberg came into play, and then the whole Facebook thing blew up and all, and then we found out that they were literally leaking or stealing, or not even caring about the privacy of our data and our pictures and everything. So then we grew more and more aware of how there are going to be now more and more people who are going to try to manipulate and exploit this virtual world too, where originally it was made for people to be comfortable enough to just throw everything into the void. So that void now was throwing back things right at you. So, so we kind of failed there, where we did not try to instill the importance of privacy in the new generation, who were literally born into the internet. They were born with the mobile phones in their hands. And again, a lot of parents had this. It's just like how, our parents turned on the TV for us. So now the new parents, they've got the mobile, so they'll give the mobile to their kids, is to keep us busy, or to keep us entertained, or to keep us quiet and sitting down in one place where they don't have to now rush about keeping an eye on us. But you know what, we still had a more healthy childhood, where we went out, we played out, we met with friends, we grouped together, we had sports activities, we had hangouts with friends, and these little things helped with social connections, they helped with social networking, they helped with, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we all grew up having connections and social networks. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about on a human level, on a personal level, which is again something that one could argue that the generation now, those who are now in their teens, they were not, most of them now, I think, were basically confined to their homes. They had indoor activities, they had very rare, seldom, infrequent amounts of outdoor activities, which is essential for a healthy mind and a healthy body. And so now, when we complain about how people have become today and how kids have become today, as I said, parents are hugely to blame, society's to blame, schools are to blame. Because before, before parents and schools, both of them were aware of their responsibilities towards the young, So it's not just that the schools took money from parents and did nothing, like how they're doing now. They're literally just ripping parents off, but they're doing jack shit about teaching children about self-protection, about self-respect, about respecting each other, about mutual understanding, about connecting with one another on a human level, about communication, about character building, about arts and crafts, and about so all those things that you expected a school to help with. in bringing up children, because remember, it takes a village. It takes a village. So that village concept was now between schools and parents, and obviously governments also were, at least they pretended to take certain things very seriously with regards to kids and their protection and society, and and trying to make things safer and trying to give healthy lives and healthy food and this and that. But everything, as we can see, is just going down the drain now. It's rapidly going down the drain. Nobody wants to be responsible for anything, neither parents nor schools nor the governments, and and the pretension is also gone. At least people before, as I said, people pretended, but now they can't even be bothered to pretend. So there's no efforts, zero efforts made. So we have made the new generation more vulnerable, and we've literally just thrown them out there with no safety net whatsoever, and then we expect them to to not be the way they are. I mean, this is obviously, and every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I mean, this is how now they will have to condition their own minds in order to interact with the kind of world that they have to navigate through. And we failed them here, where we didn't think that it was important enough to instill within them certain social etiquette, certain mannerisms, certain principles in life that could help make things a bit better, a bit easier for them, to understand what is right and what is wrong. The concept of right and wrong has been diluted so much. It's as much as how the concept of forgiveness has been exploited and manipulated and diluted to this extent, where we think that we should allow perpetrators to get away with crimes because, oh, we need to forgive them. Oh, the court needs to show mercy. Oh, we need to stop capital punishment. These are all every step you take makes you take another step, that makes you take another step, that keeps you that it keeps you taking more and more steps that take you further away from justice and from keeping a society sane, mentally speaking, psychologically speaking, economically speaking, socially speaking, religiously speaking, and to keep a society from imploding and from being unhinged. And so that is what we're going through now, is that we have a very psychotic, very unhinged society. And we're not talking about the young ones here. We're talking about all the generations right now that currently are existing at this point. All of us put together, we have the crisis that we've been pushing through. It just grew, due to selfish desires, due to narcissism, due to God complexes, due to, you know, the rich wanting to get richer, politicians, people getting power hungry, everybody having this authoritarian idea in their head where they want to abuse their power, in no matter what kind of power they have. And so the whole world has become unhinged. And you're talking about, let's just take one of the recent most examples. Look at this D4VD David, the rising artist, who is now literally a suspect in the killing of his minor girlfriend, because she's supposed to be 6 years, at least, I think, if I understood and remember well, 6 years younger than him. And she, Celeste, who went missing, since 2021, I think she went missing. And that time, I think she was probably, 14? And, her mother kept on telling them that there was this boyfriend called David, and she just became one of those cold cases of missing persons, in the long list of missing persons that people never found till date. And then now suddenly there's this abandoned Tesla in one of the poshest neighborhoods of LA, where basically celebrities live. And this is supposed to be the crime that shattered the internet, okay, accordingly. But I mean, it imagine that this missing girl, her mother, her siblings, her cousins, everybody going crazy, and nobody finding anything out until that Tesla car is found now in September 2025, and only to find her body in the trunk. And then to find that, oh, coincidence of coincidences, David, the rising star, that's her boyfriend, and that was his car, so they're now, picking up the pieces. They're trying to gather evidence and find out if he really is a suspect or not, because he is famous for his gory themed romantic songs. That again gives you an idea of how unhinged and desensitized we have become as a society. And again, it will, if you go take it back to the religious and spiritual mannerisms, or the context, you would say that, oh, this is why, so this is what I'm saying, that it's so easy to just talk about a few things and then give your conclusion as to why this is not allowed, for example, in Islam or even in Christianity or Judaism. Why mixing with the other gender so freely without reason is not allowed? Why dating, courting somebody is not allowed? Why having romantic relationships, like that is not? Why having boyfriends and girlfriends is shunned, and it's not allowed? Again, because the 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 harm the harm is more. Gone are the days when you had your high school sweethearts that always ended up getting married, and they're still together, mashallah, and they have their kids and all. That is something else. See, pure romance is something else. But what we are having nowadays, and you know why? Okay, it's a weird ass thing, but it's a fact, psychologically even. Notice, people were more intense and passionate about their feelings for each other, and they were more sincere and loyal towards each other. And those times when romantic relationships like of the sort were shunned, getting close to each other, getting intimate with each other, declaring a relationship with each other, it was shunned in society, regardless of what religion you belonged to, by the way. It didn't matter if you were polytheists or monotheists, it didn't matter. But this was the one thing in which the whole world basically were on the same page, where everybody just shunned romance. They didn't shun romance. Now here's the irony, and one begins to wonder that how hypocritical that, oh, they're always about romance and love stories, but when they actually see two people trying to get together, then they shun them. Well, as we know, in Islam, arranged marriage is not a concept. And it's not allowed. In Islam, you have to get to know the person, but there is a way to do it, you see. You're not supposed to indulge in a romantic relationship. No, you have to have meetings with that person. You have to have eye contact with that person. You have to see if there is some sort of a mutual feeling that you can have for each other, and then you get married. This is a very, very, very important condition in Islam for a marriage, So, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, have eye contact at least. That's the least you can do, because if you look into each other's eyes, you will be able to see if you people can feel anything for each other or not. So it is there. This concept is in Islam, and it is an essential concept behind marriage. But again, so you see, there is a way to do things. You have to do things the proper way. For example, you want to socialize within a group of people. Don't go and get separate and try to get intimate with each other. Don't go when you're all in your dating frenzies or whatever. Don't it is true, okay? Let us we have to be very honest, and we cannot be hypocrites ourselves and say, oh no, this is BS and there's nothing wrong with having. There is a lot wrong. Believe me, especially, as I said, in today's world. As I said, again, let's go back to psychology. Originally, because courtship, romance, romantic relationships were shunned by society at large, no matter what faith you belonged to. So you know what? Because of that, people who did fall in love were sure of their feelings. You see, when something is rare, When something is not out there in the open and you're not desensitized, that's what I'm saying. You see, media, in the name of normalizing PDAs and in the name of normalizing falling in love, they actually did not normalize these. They desensitized people to the actual importance of these feelings that, behind these relationships. So it's just like how, again, to normalize having intercourse before marriage, the media started showing more and more of these intimate relationships, so that they should, because they, according to them, it's a normal aspect of relationship. Yes, it is a normal aspect of relationship. That's why you're supposed to get married first, so that you can legitimize your affection for each other, your intimate relationship, without anybody coming in between you two, or without causing any disturbance or disruption in your relationship. And that is why you get married. And again, why is it so important to register, your relationship? Again, anything that causes more harm, more damage, both on a psychological as well as physical level, is not liked. And so it comes under the forbidden acts, like taking drugs, like drinking alcohol. There's a reason why taking drugs or drinking alcohol is considered haram or forbidden in Islam, right? And actually, if you go into, actual Christianity and Judaism, it's not allowed in either religion, by the way, before those religions were corrupted. And again, why? It is made very clear, because anything that does more harm is forbidden. Drugs, they do more harm. Now, we're talking about drugs that people take for, recreational activities, or to get high, or to get stoned, or, because what does it do? It literally alters your whole brain. It zombies you out, it zones you out, and you're no longer within your senses. And in Islam, and that is the same thing for alcohol intoxication, when you are not in control of your mind and your body, anything can happen. So, as a Muslim, it is essential that we always remain in control of our senses, and we always remain in control of our mind and our bodies. And anything that can get us out of control should not be a part of our life. And it's very important. It's extremely important, because when you cannot control yourself, you can end up doing stuff to people or to yourself. It can create an insane amount of damage. You can end up killing somebody, you can end up gravely, fatally wounding somebody or yourself. You can end up doing an extremely brutal, vile act, a malicious act that you would never have done in your sane mind. You would say or do things that you would never do in your normal state. So, yes, there is a reason. Now, the same thing is with relationships. Now, see, the problem here is that because we have desensitized people, and we have sexualized every single relationship on earth that we possibly could think of, and I am getting very tired of it. And as you know, I have actually done a whole podcast on this particular subject, so I'm trying not to go too deep into it in this particular podcast. But it is a fact that when you desensitize emotions, relationships, connections, communications, human to human interactions, when you desensitize people on the intimate acts, or on sexualization, then this is how things go haywire. And then you understand, oh, that is why all civilizations in the past and all religions had a problem with having a romantic relationship. Nobody had a problem with romance. And again, as I said, because we keep connecting the two, which is very wrong, because in real life, we never connect the two. Tell me, how many of you would ever say, oh, yeah, no, you actually need to fall in love in order to sleep with somebody? No. It's very few people who now, because now everybody knows that the two are not actually interrelated, right? You can easily end up getting intimate with somebody that you have no feelings with, because again, why? The society has desensitized it, and it has desensitized us over it. Now people are literally falling in love just for the sake of falling in love. Just like how people are getting married for the sake of getting married, and people are having children for the sake of having children. You know what I'm saying? No, it's not because you actually want it. It's not because it's actually a sincere feeling within you that is driving you to this. We are now doing all these things because we are either expected. For example, there was a time when virgins were, male and female, they were supposed to be most, considered as, the ideal state in which you're to be. And now you're actually vilifying people who even wear modest clothing. Forget about virginity. You're actually now vilifying people who wear modest clothing because for some awkward reason, they seem to make you feel wrong on the inside, and they make you feel guilty or inferior on the inside, and so you're reacting to it by literally vilifying them, which I find very interesting and very hilarious both at the same time. So, for example, in all these TikTok trends in the West where they're suddenly attacking modest women, both Christian and Muslim, I mean, it doesn't matter. The religion here is not under attack. It's just that women who prefer to wear modest clothing, the clothing, they are the ones who are being attacked basically on social media. And it's so funny because and the women who are calling them out are literally saying that, oh, they're making us, it's as if they're shaming us. So you actually feel that they're shaming you. You're actually feeling the shame it means. It's not that they're not shaming you, they're just going about their daily lives. But you're suddenly feeling inferior, you're feeling shamed. Why? Nobody said anything to you. So why is it that you on your own are feeling shamed and you're feeling, inferior and you're feeling guilty? Why? You see? It means that there is something that you feel you need to defend. Why do you need to defend yourselves? Why do you feel that shame? Where is it coming from? Yeah, you see where I'm coming from. So this is why, as I said, it doesn't matter how much we try to make abnormal things normal, and no matter how much we try to sexualize everything and objectify everything, at the end of the day, deep within our brains, within our consciousness, we know that, yeah, this is more harmful than beneficial to us, and we feel it, and that's why we get that guilt trip every now and then. Even though in today's world, as I said, nobody's actually going to say anything to you, even if you walk around half naked. But the minute you see somebody choosing not to walk half naked around and to cover themselves properly, you're suddenly, guilt tripped, and you're feeling shamed. That is actually very telling, and it says nothing about them who are dressing modestly and minding their own business, but it says a lot about you and what you're internally what you're really, really feeling that you do not want to look into, So, yeah. Just similarly, again, it is not normal. I'm sorry, but it is absolutely not. It's very normal to have feelings for other people, but it is not normal to go around like rabbits. Again, this is something that the media made normal. And in real life, teenagers, because I remember, as I said, as a writer and as a producer, and as somebody who has been in the entertainment, I feel that it is extremely important for the media to be very responsible in the way it portrays anything. Because this is not just me, anybody and everybody in the media, they know it, that our role is not just to entertain, but to educate. And it is, in fact, for this very reason, as I said, that the media started desensitizing people over PDA, over sexualization, over LGBTQ, over anything and everything, because it is deliberate. over showing teenagers as perpetual rabbits, hopping from bed to bed and being very sexual. Because teenagers are not, actually, they're not. Normal teenagers are not sexual, but you're literally teaching them to be sexual. You understand? So you're teaching the world. And it's, again, as I said, it's deliberate. Don't think that this is just in the name of entertainment and shock factor. No. Because as I said, all of us who have been a part of the media, we know what we're doing. We know that when we're putting something out there, it's going to be a teaching moment. We know that we can literally change the way people think by what we keep on and on and on showing them. It's like another form of brainwashing. You understand? I would rather be brainwashed into learning how to act like a decent person and how to talk to another person like a decent person and how to try to be a normal person, rather than being sensationalized so much so that I have actually lost the ability to understand my own feelings. And so I am now forced to go and have a relationship with somebody because that's what everybody's doing. Or I am forced to go and get married because that's what everybody's doing. Or I'm forced to go and have kids because that is what everybody's doing. You see, again, we're individuals. We're supposed to have our own mindset, but we're being conditioned. We're being conditioned wrongly by every single entity around us. We're being conditioned wrongly by society. We're being not even by society, actually. We, society at large, are being conditioned by certain organizations, you can say. We are being conditioned by our politicians, we're being conditioned by the media, we're being conditioned by institutions, we're being conditioned by the military. So, anybody and everybody who has a role, by our parents, we're being conditioned. And I'm sorry to say, but the conditioning is all the wrong things. We're not being conditioned to have a mind of our own and to actually have the ability to think and process things. No, we are being conditioned to live life in a certain way. And if we don't live it in that way, then there's something wrong with us. And I'm sorry to say, but the LGBTQ who will now try to say that, oh, this is exactly what we're fighting against. No, you're doing the same thing at your end now. Now you're conditioning the world that it's actually abnormal for the world to be different from you. Just like how we started conditioning the world to this point where now it is abnormal to be a virgin. You understand? And I've done a whole podcast on this as well, so you can listen to that too, although it was a long time ago again. But yeah, I mean, we are literally fighting for a cause against conditioning of minds, only to end up being the one conditioning minds all over again. You know? So it's very ironic, but that's how it is now. That's where we stand today. And I'm so worried right now. Not actually, I'm not worried because I know that this is also part of the divine plan again. But just because it's part of the divine plan doesn't mean that this being the divine plan is also now what tells us that, oh, this is part of the test. Remember, we're here on a journey, and throughout our journey we have tests that we need to take. And every test, that we hand over has a meaning, right? And this is a whole new test. This is that test. This is, maybe let's just say, this is the big test, the test of all tests, where now we need to understand what we need to do and how we need to navigate through these times and how we need to help the next generation navigate through the times, because the times that are coming ahead are going to be darker, they're going to be deeper, they're going to be worse. You're literally going to the abyss. The abyss that everybody always seems to now talk about with so much cliche that it has lost its meaning. Again, you see, when you keep on repeating the same thing over and over again, two things happen. You get desensitized, and it loses its meaning, and then it becomes a whole part of you. So either you get desensitized and it loses its meaning, or it becomes who you are, and what your life is. As I said, we are dealing here with vulnerable minds. They're vulnerable because they were exposed to all these things right from the start without first being taught about maintaining their own individuality, about having their own thoughts. That is one of the first things that we kind of want our children to be, right? We want to be their own people. We want them to be able to use their brains, to have their own thoughts, to be independent, before we push them out into the crowd. But now, actually, what's happening is we don't even get to do that, and they're already pushed as soon as they're born into that crowd where there are millions and millions of voices that have been, trained to market, sell, and at the same time condition and then desensitize. So, yes, we are dealing with vulnerable minds. And in all of this vulnerability, you're having more and more cases of people encroaching upon other people's personal space. Again, the first thing that we need to teach our children, personal space. But if you keep on and on putting the camera onto your children because you want to have a family vlog, you have already disrupted their sense of personal space, and with that, their sense of self-respect. You're making children into spectacles. You're becoming spectacles without your choice, but you're making children spectacles. They have no say in it, they have no choice in it. And then you sit and mourn of the fact, before the social media, parents were already somehow or the other, stripping their children off of their individual, their self-respect, their dignity, which is again something I've talked about. And now the social media has just made it all too easy, and it's made them all too vulnerable now, that you literally cannot even save them now if you want to. And then you wonder why depression is high. Hell, depression is high in our generation. The amount of stress, the amount of tensions, unnecessary stress and tensions that we have and we have to go through, that in itself is enough to give us depression. Because as I said, even when there was no social media, our parents kind of already crapped our lives. Okay? It's a miracle we're managing somehow to stay sane. It's a miracle that we're managing to survive our depression. But I'm sorry, but how long are we going to survive? And now if you look at us, we're literally dropping like flies, in case you didn't know. Remember, I did a podcast already once before where I talked about how our generation, our younger people, people in their 30s, people in their 40s, they're now dying more than those who are older. Obviously, you have that fact as well, that once you reach a certain age, then you just keep on living, yes. But the amount of stress, unhealthy tension, unhealthy depression that has plagued us, you are seeing more and more young people succumb to their deaths. I have lost 2 friends now. One of my friends I lost, it's been now almost a decade, if not more. It was one of my closest friends. And we studied together at uni, and we remained friends. We worked together as colleagues. And then when I went back abroad, he was there again too. And so we always kept in touch. And then when I came back here, and then every time he would come here for a visit, we would again stay in touch, again meet each other. And I'm telling you, at least I can say that thankfully he had managed to get some peace before he passed away. Life became a little better before he passed away. But now I've lost another friend only yesterday. And he was my age, and we kind of grew up together. We lost touch and everything. Obviously, I tend to lose touch with all my friends when they get married. The friend that I lost a little over a decade ago was the only one I kept in touch with, just even after his marriage. I became very good friends with his wife. And now this other old friend of mine that I've lost yesterday, he too succumbed to depression. So it's a bit controversial what I'm going to say, but those who know. When I see my very good friends who are actually very good people, when I see them leave and exit stage left, I have hope, because I have hope that I'm going to be next. It means that, oh, okay, there's a movement here. My turn will come. That is my hope. My sadness is that they were pushed to all this crap, that they didn't get a moment's peace. Well, by they, I don't mean both of my friends. I'm talking mainly about the one who passed away yesterday. Because there are those who are lucky enough to get moments of respite every now and then. And then there are those of us who get no respite whatsoever. And it's one big, never ending nightmare. And as time passes by, the window, which is now just a ventilation, just a vent now, that vent is also closing. So with each minute that passes by, with each hour that passes by, with each day that passes by, it is getting the light in the tunnel, let's say, is disappearing faster and faster. And the way out, the little breaks of respite that we would have had maybe a few years ago are now completely gone. So when you reach at that point, then there is only one way that you need, and that is the way out completely. And I've said this before, that God actually, the only mercy at that time he can show is to finally give you that break, that final break away from all of this BS, all of this crap. So, yes, to me, especially as I said, if you're a believer and you know that this world is finite and that this world has its time limitation and that it's not forever and we have to go back anyway, it gets harder and harder to live in this world, to be honest. And it becomes more and more important for us to leave and cash out while we can. And again, as I said, if you're a believer and you have to go back, then believe me, there is no, it is a mercy. It is a mercy when it's ended. Because I know, because this is something that I know would be the biggest mercy ever if it ended for me now, before things get worse, before things just go down that rabbit hole of point of no return, before I end up mucking up my akhirat as well. So it's better to cash out and go while I still can. So it is a huge mercy. But at the same time, as I said, it is a huge sadness that I think everybody's allowed a bit of a break. Everybody's allowed a breather. And when you don't catch it, you don't catch that break, you don't get that breather, and then at the end, it's lights out. And then everybody realizes that, oh, they went through so much and life was hard and, and it finally took them away. So, like, again, it's not like you did anything to make it better when they were here, you know? So, yeah, that's another hypocritical aspect that I see, which is why I say, yeah, it's better to just cash out. Because this hypocrisy here, where again, we're standing by helplessly watching Palestine drown, we're watching Kashmir just get destroyed, we're watching people in Pakistan, getting destroyed by insane people who are not even 1% of this world. and the whole lot of us together are unable to do anything about it, that is a lie. That is the biggest BS ever, where we're just staying here like herd of sheep doing nothing. So suddenly we remember God. But when we're actively trying to destroy lives, that time we become God. That time we don't remember that, oh, just go with the flow and let God do what he's doing. No. But when when things go wrong, then we sit back and we say, oh God, it's all God, and we have to trust in God, and he did it. Now he can fix it. No, he didn't do it. You did it, but now you want him to fix it. That's amazing. So yeah. So I think, what, we really need to get our minds back on hinge. Okay? We need to get our unhinged lives back on hinge. We need to start taking care about people around us who are in vulnerable situations. We need to once again instill upon young people the importance of privacy, the importance of self-respect. Here I'm talking about again the the murder of Celeste and her potential suspect of a boyfriend. you know Look around you. People are acting like animals, literally. They're not evolving their minds. They're getting depraved and they're getting worse. And again, the whole society is to blame for that, because we're just sitting back and letting things happen. We have a responsibility to help vulnerable people, to help vulnerable minds to get back on track. We have to, first of all, teach them the importance of self respect, of self preservation, of personal space. We have to make them understand why having relationships with people is not always a good idea, and why the fact that we are being pressured into having relationships with people is a part of this whole conditioning of societies. Literally regressing our minds. We are supposed to be evolving our minds, not regressing ourselves into becoming animals, where it's all about lust and it's all about sexualization of every single relationship and every single gender and every single age group possible. We need to stop that. Okay? I'm sorry, but there's nothing normal about this. And again, I don't need to go into great details in order to explain why this is not normal. Everybody knows it, because people are beginning to scream now. People are beginning to talk. But again, who started it? Who brought it to this point? We need to stop conditioning our children's minds with the wrong things. If you want to condition their minds, condition it with, again, privacy, personal space, self-respect, self-preservation, thinking for themselves, making informed decisions. Not just handing them a mobile right at the minute they're born and say, oh, you know what, I don't have time for you, just play with the mobile. There is no PG on your mobile. They will have access to anything and everything. Do you have an actual proper PG set up on your PC so that they don't have access to anything and everything on the internet? We're all responsible for whatever it is that's going on. We need to, again, make people understand why and how romance was different in the previous times, and how and why it's different now, and how it is not romance, and what is the whole meaning of romance. The whole meaning, those romance is not lust, and it's not about falling in love for the sake of falling in love, or about getting intimate with other people. It was a highly mental thing as well. It was a feeling, and it was extremely spiritual and mental. Okay, it wasn't even physical for the longest time. But again, because anything in which the tendency to cause harm to yourself and another person, mentally, as in psychologically and physically, and again, if you're boyfriends and girlfriends, because you're not legally tied to each other, and hey, this is why it's important. This is why marriage actually becomes important when you're in a relationship, because you're not legally tied to each other, which means that you don't have rights on each other, but you are acting as if you have rights on each other, and then things go haywire. Abusive relationships, where you are bogged down and you're bound, but you're not even bound. You're not married. You don't have any legal rights on each other, because you don't actually have any rights on each other. But you have given those rights to each other for some insane reason, to cross each other's personal space, and then you end up getting bound by this invisible lock that you've put around you, this invisible thread that you have, which has no meaning. Why? Because you've been now psychologically conditioned and you're in a habit of being with each other. This is a relationship of habit, and you can't break away. Believe me, relationships like these are more harmful to our minds and our bodies than having a legit relationship in which the law can intervene, in which everybody can intervene, and in which you can stand by your rights. Although, mind you, getting married doesn't mean that you're not going to get bogged down in another abusive relationship, or it's not even about that. But there are some safety nets, you can say, that the law tries to provide here. But again, I would say, first of all, this whole need to be in a relationship or to be in a marriage, where is it coming from? What happened to wanting to live our lives and, exploring our lives, exploring ourselves, understanding what we want from our life? What happened to that? Why are we rushing into this codependency lifestyle where we only end up hurting ourselves and each other? Why? I hope you understand without my going deeper into this. I hope these little hints are enough to tell you what it is that I'm trying to say, and to help us all try to figure things out and make more informed decisions about our lives. And this is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.